Today I want to talk about one of my favorite pieces of software, and that's Microsoft's Power BI, which has really taken the ability to analyze data to a whole nother level and then to share it with people in your organization that need to benefit from it most. And not only can you share it with people inside your organization, but there's some really clever ways that you can share it with people outside your organization as well too, whether it's customers, vendors, or if you're doing a lot of business with repeat customers, you can share it with them as well too. My name is Joe Schulfer. I'm with SolveOnyx. I started this business as a way to communicate to other business leaders, managers, executives that need those tools to get their job done. And I'm going to show you how to do things yourself, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands into this sort of stuff, and learning how to do what you need to do to run your business in an intelligent way and not have to rely on a massive IT department or outside consultants and all that sort of thing. I'm going to show you how to do some of that stuff yourself. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to talk about Microsoft Power BI today. Like I said, this is one of my favorite tools. It allows you to slice and dice data in so many different ways. But what I really like about it most is it allows you to get rid of those endless reports that get emailed out or printed and put in your inbox. These are ways to look at data on a regular basis, and you don't have to worry about the steps involved with updating them, running the reports. This type of system is going to allow you to just look at it when you need the data, consume it, and take action on it, not worrying about how you prepare the data. And we can spend hours and hours talking about how to do that, but we got to just start with the basics. I'm going to give you guys the groundwork to jump right into Power BI and start doing some pretty cool stuff with it. So let's go ahead and get started. So to get started, what we're going to do today is just go through the absolute very basics, getting familiar with Power BI and the different ways that you can work with data. One of the easiest ways to do that is just to connect directly to a file that maybe contains some sort of data. And so we're going to do that today. I actually have a CSV file of a bunch of animation movies, and we're going to use that as an example to show how to get your data into Power BI, how to manipulate the data a little bit, and then we're going to learn how to generate some very basic visuals and turn it into a bit of a dashboard. Now, this file is going to be pretty static unless this is connected to some sort of web source that's being updated on a regular basis. This is going to be pretty static, but I think it's a good way to kind of understand how the system works. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and load Microsoft Power BI, and we're just going to jump in here and we are going to create a blank report. Now, the way Power BI is set up, I always look at it as there's kind of two sides to it. There's the data side and then there's the report side. And they continue to add more features and things like that to make it even more robust. But at the end of the day, it just kind of boils down to two main areas. There's your data and then there's your reporting. So what we need to do first is this is where you build your reports. And you can't really build reports until you have some data to work with. So what we want to do is come over here and we want to see our data area. It says you don't have any data yet. Let's get some data. You can click it over there or you can click it up here, get data. We'll click it up here. And what I'm going to do, like I said, this is going to be a static data set. So we're just going to jump over here and select a text CSV file because that's what we're going to be working with. I'm going to connect. And it's going to ask me where I want to search for or find this file. I have it in this content folder. Go ahead and click on animation. And as long as your data is in somewhat of a tabular format, you're going to be able to work with it. And what's nice is it's pretty much preloaded with the ways to, or preloaded with different sort of delimiters and such. This is a comma separated file. So it scanned it and it sees some columns and some rows. Looks like we got movie name, year, certificate runtime, rating, and gross based on the first 200 rows. So I think it's done a good job. interpreting what sort of data is in this file. So let's go ahead and hit transform data. And what that's going to do is it's going to load it into your data section of the program. And this is going to look very much like Excel, except you're really not able to edit the data. You're just kind of massaging it, manipulating it in different ways, maybe to get it to display a certain way, to update the data types, because you're going to be able to do a lot of complex, calculations and things like that. And how you have some of these different columns formatted is going to help with that. So first thing, let's just go through and just kind of clean up some of this data a little bit. So it looks like what we're working with here is some numbers over on the right-hand side. So gross in dollars. And I had to look at that closely for a minute. I guess that is in true dollars. It's not in like thousands or millions. And I can just quickly check that by sorting this in a descending fashion. So yeah, Incredibles 2, 60 million. Okay, so that is in dollars. But one thing I like to do is let's convert this data type over to a currency, a fixed decimal number. And we're going to replace that type, which was previously assigned. Because what ends up happening is when you load data, it's going to, well, first thing it's going to do over here in your steps, and these are all the different steps that you apply to this data, and you can go forward and back, and you got to make sure, you got to be careful, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You got to make sure you don't break your data as you go through these different steps. But first thing it's going to do, it's going to promote the headers, because a lot of times when you bring the data in, it doesn't know if you have a header column or not. And so that's what it's done. If you notice here, it just arbitrarily names it column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is all pretty straightforward stuff. If you've ever worked with data, you know that this is just kind of how things work. So it promotes the headers. So you take the very first row and you turn it into your header names. From there, Power BI might try to interpret what some of the different column types are. I like to just double check, make sure they got it right. So in this case, without doing anything, it basically just interprets everything as a text column. But we know that this is in dollars because it says gross in dollars, but we want to go ahead and make that more explicit and say we're going to assign that a fixed decimal, more specifically currency. Now, whether or not you want to have 2 decimal points after that, there's some ways to change that, but for now we'll leave that kind of as is. I am a bit of a stickler on the way columns get named. I think that's important. We're probably not really interested in the rating or what that really means. But just to give you an idea of how you can update the different column names, let's change that one to score. Let's turn this one into, we'll just call it like, what do they call it? Like box office sales or something. And runtime, that's good, but just for the sake of keeping everything kind of consistent, we'll put a caps in there. This is what I always consider it, the rating, like the PG, PG-13, whatever year. That makes sense. We'll just put a caps in there, and then we'll call this the title. So there we go. We got some consistent looking column names, and you'll appreciate having something that makes sense when you start analyzing the data and generating reports across it. The only thing that I would probably do as far as data types is let's go back a step and stay on the change type step. And I want to change the type of the rating, which is still called rating because we haven't renamed it yet, but we want to go ahead and change this to, let's change that to a decimal number. That way, if we wanted to do some more numerical analysis on it down the road, we could do that. The other one, let's see, runtime. It looks like they've always put like a MIN at the end of the number. So what I want to do is I want to actually change. I'm going to do a replace command. I can right click on runtime, and I'm going to do this replace values, and I'm going to do value defined as space min, and I'm going to replace it with nothing. and I'm going to hit OK. And now it's taken that data and it's converted it into a text string that is now just a number. So I can now change that over to, let's assume they're all whole numbers. And now I'll be able to do some things with that down the road that's maybe a little bit easier to work with. As far as rating goes, this is another way to kind of maintain the integrity of your data. If you look at all the different types of values you have in this column, I want to distill this down to just the basic, like let's just say G, PG, PG-13, and R. So what we want to do is let's take TV, PG, for instance, and convert all of those to PG so that they're easily grouped. So what we're going to do is we're going to search for TV-PG. So I'm going to do that same replace values, and maybe I should go back up a step here to replace values so it kind of consolidates all these steps together. And let's do replace values here. And we want to select, what do we say, TV-PG, and we want to change that over to PG. So let's hit OK to that one. And let's run that again and do TVG, TV-G with G. And let's do TV mature audience. Let's call that R. TV mature audience is R. And then we'll do, I think there's also a M in there too. Let's replace that one with R as well. So I think that kind of consolidates it a little bit. So we got G, PG, PG-13, rated R, not rated, and TV-14. Let's call TV-14 PG-13. Replace values. Yep. And we said TV-14 to PG-13. It's like, why are we screwing around with this? Because now we know that all of the values in this data set are either G, PG, PG-13, or R. I said you couldn't change data really in here. I guess this would be an exception where you're just kind of massaging the data a little bit so it's more uniform, more consistent. Maybe you don't have access to the source data to update it, but you want to display it in a way that's easier to follow. These are just some tricks that you can do. You can get into a lot of details on how to write some of the underlying code, some of the formulas you see up here in the formula bar. It looks like Excel. I think the equations and the formulas and the coding and all that are a lot more complicated than Excel until you get the hang of it, because there's a lot of different commands that you can run. But if you get really good at programming in like the DAX language, or I think they call it M query or something, you can write some really complex queries in here that take your data source and apply all sorts of steps to it. But when you're just getting started and you're kind of doing everything by hand, kind of manually setting all these things, working your way through, seeing how it looks, it's really important to kind of keep a nice, clean set of like steps over here, so you know, like if you ever needed to go back or forward in these steps, it's like, what did I do here, what did I do there? You can, even take it a step further and like rename these so you know like what that step was without having to try to see, well, how did my data change from this step to that step, right? So you can just rename these. Like for instance, change type. What I did there was set I changed the dollars to currency. So, maybe you can say box office sales to dollar or something. You could just call it whatever you want, or, rename columns. That's pretty straightforward. But when you get into all these like replace values, sometimes it's useful to call it what it is. In this case, we called it runtime. Replace values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's where we went through and kind of updated all of the ratings to be that kind of uniform, consistent format. And then, of course, we changed the last one, runtime, over to integer, a whole number. Okay, so a couple things, just kind of best practices, at least in my mind. While you can sort data in this area, sorting is really not something I personally would let, I would sort data in here unless you're just trying to quickly check something. I would always erase that step before I took this data and ran reports on it, because you'll learn down the road when you start like publishing these data sets to the Power BI service, and it's, maybe it's updating on a regular basis. It's just one more step of, server computations that got to take place in order to generate this data set the way you told it to. And sorting to me is something you should do more on the reporting side versus the back-end data side. And it can be pretty, intensive if you really don't need it. Like, you should always try to filter first and then do some of the sorting. At least that's how I would go about it. So I generally try to avoid sorting data. Also, be careful not to leave a column filtered. Like, if you were quickly checking something to see all your PG-13 data and you close this and go and try to create a report against it, and you're like, well, where is all my data? Where's all my data? It's not there because you filtered it, and the report's only going to be able to look at this data set that you have shown right here. So you want to avoid keeping anything filtered. We talked about labeling columns. Again, that's just something, it's going to make it really easy. When we get into future videos and I start showing you how to connect to real-time data sources, and a lot of times using APIs and things like that, you're going to connect to data and it's going to use whatever system column names they have. And sometimes if it's, a SQL server or, MySQL or something, it's going to have column names, whatever the developer gave it, and it might not always make sense to you. So you're going to want to name those so you can keep track of what it is. You can break this, so to speak. Like, if you were to, let's say, go back in time in your steps and you change this to say run space time, for instance, and you inserted that step and you got farther down towards the end, you're going to get an error because unfortunately it's not smart enough to know that you changed that column in an earlier step, so it doesn't update itself automatically. It's still looking for that runtime without the space in it. So if I go and I delete this step, that error is going to go away and you're going to be good to go. So just one of those things that I wanted to show to make sure you avoid. Okay, that's like at the highest level, how to work with data on the kind of the back end of Power BI. Now that we have some cleaned up data, let's go ahead and generate some reports against it. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit this close and apply. And what this is doing kind of in the background is it's getting your data ready, it's loading the model, and it's basically just making all of those fields that you prepared available to put into one of several different sorts of visuals that come out of the box in Power BI. So that little data set that we put together, that's kind of what Power BI calls like a query of data. And you're going to see all of your queries over here in this right-hand side. If I clap this visualizations tab down so you just see your data, you see that animation data set right there. And then if I open that up, you're going to see all of the different fields that we were working with. Again, making sure those names are what you assigned is helpful, because if you're working with a data set, I've worked with files where maybe there's 20 different queries over here and each one might have 15 or 20 different fields, and just being able to quickly put your eye on one makes things a lot easier. So let's kind of explore some of the very basic visualizations. It's like, wow, you've done what I could have done in Excel. Yes, that's absolutely true. You could have done most of this in Excel, but where this stuff really shines is when you want to start building reports or dashboards and things like that. If you're an executive and you want to build a dashboard just for your sales department or maybe your finance department, you can actually build real-time financial reports, cash flow statements right here that are updated on a daily basis that you could open it up first thing in the morning, have a fresh look at what's going on. So let's talk about some of the built-in visuals that come with Power BI. Probably one of the most useful ones, just to take a quick look at your data and make sure everything is kind of where it should be, is the table visual. What the table does is it allows you to visually display rows and columns of your data, and it functions a lot like pivot tables in Excel. I'm not a huge fan of pivot tables, never really have been, but it looks and feels like the pivot table features. So, what we can do is just kind of drag and drop a report. Let's say, we want to build a dashboard and it has, let's go ahead and throw title in there. So the title of the movie. And we want to put in there the year it came out and the rating. All right. Some of these titles are long, and just like anything, we can kind of tighten that up. And there's all sorts of settings you can do to keep it at a certain height or wrap the text, whatever. But let's say we were building a dashboard and we wanted just a certain range of years in this report. We could come over here to our filters area, and you got something called filters on this visual. If I take a look at what I have available, I have rating, I have title, I have year, I have all of the fields that I've dropped onto this little table visual. So if we only want to look at movies that were released, in this case, we'll call it 2021, 20, and 2022. So I can kind of just filter that visual right there. And then, of course, we can sort, like I was saying, you can sort right off the report. We can do ascending or descending. So we have that. So that might be, just a very simple table you want to put together. But where it gets kind of interesting, if you want to create a more interactive sort of report, what you can do is, let's say we want to, let's clear those filters, and that kind of goes away. There's another kind of really useful tool I like to throw in the dashboards and the reports I build for myself, for my team, would be what they call a slicer. And the slicer is going to be this little guy right here. We're going to drag him or click him here. Put that in the wrong spot. You got to be careful if you have a visual selected and you click another one, it wants to replace it versus adding a new one. So here's a new visual. In this case, it's the slicer visual. And what we want to slice against is the year. So we're going to drag the year over to here. And now these two visuals are talking to one another. And so what's happening is when I select 2014, it's showing me 2014. And I'm selecting 2015, 2016. So, you have some of those Excel tools, but it allows you to kind of make everything all talk to each other, which is kind of nice. And just like, a lot of other applications, if I hold down Control, I can select multiple years. You can even create more complex slicers. So if I want to slice based on not only year, but also on the rating, let's drag that in there as well too. And so now it's created like what I would call like a compound slicer. So now I could look at 2020 only rated R movies. In this case, there's one, or we could even go in the opposite direction. Let's clear both of those out. Probably could have just flipped those around, but let's go by rating first, and then we'll add year below it. So it'll put that compound in the opposite direction. So we could quickly see like how many PG movies, what years had PG movies, for instance, or whatever, what years were there R-rated animation movies, every year, every other year. So that's the slicer. That's the table visual. Now, I'm more of a numbers guy. I'm an engineer by training, and so numbers tell a lot of stories too, not just text. And so we have some numbers. We have runtime. Let's drop that in there. Now that's a number field because we defined it that way. And in this case, because it's a number, it's going to want to apply some sort of a aggregate to that display. Now, it's showing the sum of runtime, but there's only one movie called A Wizard's Tale. And if I turn off the don't summarize, none of those values really are going to change. But what's nice about when you do the summarizing, you're going to get like totals at the bottom. So, if you do average, it is showing the average of each movie. But if there's only one Big Hero 6, the average is going to be the actual time. But what's kind of nice is at the bottom, it's showing you the average of the runtime in minutes for all of the movies that you have in this visual. Now, if you want to see the average runtime of all PG movies in the year 2017, we could do that too. You can clear all these. Let's go 2017 PG rated movies. Average runtime is just under 95 minutes. So that's how you can do some of your summarization of numerical data. And then there's a whole host of other things you can do as well. It's probably a whole nother video on doing charting and graphs and things like that, but you could put together some nice bar charts that really summarize your data as well. If you're more of a visual interpreter of data, let's build a bar chart that shows, for instance, we're going to define this as like the average runtime by year. And if you notice, when you start dragging these fields, you're going to get your x-axis, your y-axis. So on the y-axis, we have the sum of runtime, but I said we wanted to make it the average. So let's go down here and select the average runtime. Now this is 2017, and this one is connected back to that slicer. It's probably outside the scope of this, introductory video, but there are ways to detach this slicer from this visual. We could talk about that another time. But for the sake of this video, let's just clear everything in which, oh, by the way, this, if nothing is selected, it's all the data. If everything is selected, it's all the data. So it kind of just works that way. If you have a bunch of just random things selected and you need to quickly reset it, just hit the little eraser up there and you'll go back to normal. And so now you see a nice little summary of average runtime by year. Now you're like, why is that so gradually decreasing? Power BI is doing some things in there. It's sorting the data based on highest to lowest. You could also sort this data by the actual year instead of the average runtime. There's a lot of ways that you can format these visuals to show things just the way you want to. Another one of my favorite tools to pull out on the visual on a dashboard is, I like the classic, just the big old number put up there. And that's nice for you're trying to hone in on one particular thing, like what are my sales year to date, or what's our average profit margin year to date, and just displaying that in a big block right on your report, so your eyes are really drawn to that. And so we could do something like that as well too. And let's just say that's going to be our box office sales, 17.18 billion. That's a big number. That's because it's the entire data set. But if we wanted to just quickly see how much has been grossed on our PG movies, there you go, 15.414 billion, or just looking at it on a yearly basis, you get that sort of nice summary as well too. So I think that's about all for this video. I appreciate your time checking it out. this is just scratching the surface on what you're able to do in Power BI. Once you get the basics down, you're going to start thinking about a lot of other things that you're going to be able to do with this. Thanks for checking it out. I hope you learned something. Check in later for more videos. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Power BI and really uncovering all the ways that you can empower your teams and yourself, for that matter, to develop the reports that you and your people need in order to get the job done and not have to worry about, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I generate this report? Because you're going to spend some time, you're going to invest a little bit of your energy up front in getting this stuff set up. And then it's just going to go on autopilot. And you're going to be able to consume this data on a regular basis, and you're going to be able to make informed decisions so you can navigate your company through the ups and the downs and just make well-informed decisions. But in order to do that, you got to learn a few of these tools. You got to understand how this data is going to work and how it's going to help you get the information you need to make those decisions. So again, my name's Joe Schulfer. I'm with SolveOnyx. Check out my intro video in the description of this video to learn a little bit more about myself and what I'm on a mission to do. And until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you later.